Okay, welcome to session 7, Digitalization, Platform Services and Their Implications for the Labor Market. This session is chaired by Sonia Bashir Kubir of SBK Ventures and Foundation. We begin with our presentation from Dr. Onono Raihan and Ryan Mahbub, both of iSocial. Next, we have Dr. Mirza Hassan, who is joining us virtually, and Saida Selina Aziz, both of BIGD. Then we have Tamid bin Mahmoud of BIGD. Our last presentation is from Professor Mohammed Tariq Hassan of the University of Dhaka. And then we end with our discussant, AKM Fahim Masroor, CEO of BD Jobs. Everyone can take their seat and remember to speak into the mic so everyone can hear. Mr. Masroor is on his way, and we'll be starting without him for now.
Thank you. Do you want me to take over? It's about noon, so good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Sonia, but just 1 second. I think we're having a slight audio issue.
Okay.
Okay, Appa, can you speak again?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Audible. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, and very delighted to be chairing this session on digitalization, platform services, and their implications for the labor market. And I'm very happy to see all the esteemed panelists. There will be a lot of information sharing that we would be finding valuable. So just a little bit of a brief on the digital labor platform business model, how it's transforming the world of work in a number of ways. The algorithmic management practices, changing the responsibility of investing in capital assets and operating costs to the workers. And most importantly, it's creating a dual labor market with a core workforce of internal employees and a large external mediated workforce. The algorithmic management practices adopted by platforms such as ratings and reputations has implications on the workers' well-being with respect to earnings and access to work, and can lead to long hours of working, impact work-family life balance. Many workers express stress due to their work and risk work-related injury and lack social protection of work and the work injury-related benefits. It puts them in a vulnerable situation. There's a need to protect workers, and irrespective of their employment status, which requires coherent, coordinated international effort. So in this discussion, we will hear from the panelists, and then in the end, we'll come and have a summary for all. So without further ado, I would like to start the session on working conditions and structural challenges in the Bangladesh gig economy. And I'd like to invite Dr. Ananda Raihan, Chief Imaginator, Data Sense iSocial, and Ryan Abu, Research Associate, Data Sense Social. So over to you, Raihan bhai.
Thank you, Sonia. Good morning, everyone. Congratulations to BIGD for organizing this conference and over-encompassing on digital economy. And thank you for inviting us today here. So our presentation is on the digital and gig economy and the challenges vis-a-vis the working conditions. So both myself and Ryan will present together. So the gig economy is a new component to the digital economy in Bangladesh, and it's not a long history, 7 years, but it has grown tremendously. If you consider both the online gig work and the location-based gig works, then altogether there are more 750,000 people are engaged with this economy. So while we are talking about investment, growth, and phenomenal, I think, performances of many startups, but we often do not talk about the gig workers themselves and their working conditions. So we'll basically, Oxford Internet Institute's Fairwork project launched a global project in 36 countries now. Bangladesh is one of them. And Data Science Social is a partner, research partner with this initiative. And we are conducting annually ratings research on the platforms. So last year was the first one, and this year we're conducting research now. The results will be published in October sometimes. So today's presentation is based on the findings of the last research work. So I'd like to invite Ryan to do the first part of this presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I would like to begin with an introduction to the gig economy and what gigs are to begin with. Essentially, the gig economy constitutes of gigs that are performed by workers on a short-term basis that are time-dependent, and they sort of rely on a platform to be connected to customers. So this tripartite relationship between workers, platforms, and the customers themselves are at the crux of the gig economy and all the issues that may arise from it. So what sets the gig economy apart from the orthodox or more traditional form of the economy is that the relationship that workers share with the platforms themselves. So traditionally, even though we see that workers are spending a lot of their time, even more so than in traditional forms of employment in the gig economy, putting in the hours for the platforms themselves, they're often not characterized as employees of the platform, but rather as independent contractors. And this may just seem like a technicality, but this characterization is at the heart of a lot of the issues that we are going to discuss in our presentation today. So how did the gig economy emerge and how did it come to prominence in Bangladesh? So essentially, the trend of the gig economy has to be charted back towards the start of the digitalization revolution that we're seeing unfolding. So over the past decade or so, we have seen an expansion of the digital infrastructure, both in terms of smartphone usage and in terms of internet connectivity and usage across the country. This essentially laid the infrastructure along which the gig economy has unfolded. But there's also been shifts in working conditions and working preferences, which began with the start of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that has also been an important push factor for the proliferation of the gig economy. And the emergence of the gig economy can also be understood as a sort of formalization of the informal work sector that we've seen that is very prominent in the Bangladeshi economy and other economies of sorts in countries like ours. So an important part of understanding the gig economy is the different types of gig work that arises. That brings me to the typology of gig work. You see in our neat little table over here that there are three primary categories you can understand gig performed. So first of all, we have the location-based gigs. This will be the one that most of us here are most familiar with. This constitutes of customers being connected to workers through the platforms where there is an in-person physical aspect in the service delivery. So the examples would be rideshare, food delivery, domestic work platforms, etc. Then we have online freelance cloud work platforms. So this is where customers can put up services that they require from freelancers on online platforms, and then the workers can bid for those work and then get some sort of engagement. Both the a commission from either the customer or the worker, or in some cases both. And finally, we have e-commerce last mile delivery. This is where it gets a little tricky, but essentially it's where e-commerce platforms rely on third-party vendors for the last mile delivery of items ordered via their website. And often the delivery workers here are engaged on a gig basis with the platforms. That is, they're not employees of either the e-commerce platform or the delivery platform that they're working for. So the reason why we have illustrated these three different typologies here is to illustrate the heterogeneity of gig work, and also that all three of them are relatively new phenomenon. These kind of works wasn't as common maybe a decade ago. And this leads to the difficulties that we're going to talk about in both governance and regulation, and in terms of labor standards in the gig economy. So coming back to this slide for a little bit, I'd also want to introduce the actors who are prominent in the gig economy itself. And this neat little diagram will sort of chart and map out who those are. So at the top, we have the labor side, who are getting employed into the gig economy and via the platforms we have there on the right, who will provide the investment and the capital and the technological framework along which all of this will unfold. To the left, we have the consumers, who are the demand side of the platform economy. And overall, they come together and the gig economy unfold. Whereas at the bottom, we have the government itself, whose role here is rather dubious because as we will discuss later, there are a lot of regulatory questions that need to be answered and a lot of gaps that need to be filled. Again, circling back to this slide over here, Raihan Bhai talked about Fairwork Bangladesh, which is the part of the study that we have undertaken through last year, and we're doing again this year. So it is, as he mentioned, one of the first types of these studies in this country, because the labor standards in the gig economy hasn't been studied a whole lot before. And there's also tends to be a lack of accountability from the side of the platforms just because of the vacuum left in the regulatory sector of the gig economy. So we have conducted this study in partnership with the Oxford Internet Institute, the Fairwork Foundation, and the Berlin Institute of Social Science. And for its methodology, we've used a mixed method approach. So we have conducted a survey of around 100 workers. It was a purposeful sampling, and we just wanted to see what some of the issues that they're facing in the gig economy. And that survey alluded to a lot of the bigger themes that we'll be talking about. And we also sat down with a lot of the stakeholders. So we sat down with unions, technical experts, and of course the platforms themselves. So we reviewed 10 platforms in last year's report, 9 in this year's, and we essentially wanted to hear their perspectives and their approach to how they set up the labor regulatory policies in their own platforms. And over here, you'll see the Fairwork Principles. I will not dwell on this slide for too long, but as you can see, the philosophy of fair work is surrounded by the ideas of fair pay, fair working conditions, fair contracts, fair management, and fair representation of workers into the platforms. So overall, to ensure, just to ensure that the workers are being provided with these 5 basic protections or guarantees in the work that they're conducting. And essentially the survey that we conducted and the scores that we ultimately assigned to the platforms based on their labor standards are governed along these principles. So I want to move on towards the findings of our study. So to begin with, just posing a question of why workers are drawn to the platform economy to begin with. So I've alluded to this with the with talking about how the platform economy emerged, but also it's important to note that these workers are essentially responding to changing trends in the overall economy itself, and they're looking for more from like maybe what they haven't been given in traditional forms of employment or a lack of opportunity in the economy in general. So one of the questions that we asked our workers were, what made you join the platform, or why were you drawn to it? I'm not sure if you can read the text over there, but the major the biggest response over there was income needs, that they were looking for a decent income. And the next big one was flexibility in working hours. So that's one of the biggest selling points of the gig economy. And that's what really draws workers to it, because in traditional forms of employment, you don't really have a lot of flexibility with the working hours that you get to work. But in the gig economy, that all changes because you are supposed to be your own boss, or at least that's what the marketing pitch is to the workers. And the other ones were recommendations by people that they trust, or they were drawn to the working conditions that the gig economy supposedly offers, which is interesting because of our later findings. And another question that we asked them was, what was their main attraction to the job? And as you can probably predict, that it's the flexibility. That they, even after joining, they see that there is a sort of flexibility. They think that that they're getting at least some sort of decent working conditions here, and that it's a decent wage. So these might be a little perplexing to those familiar with the working conditions in the gig economy itself, but they're very interesting findings because like, even though there might be a lot of issues with the economy itself, the workers themselves are rather happy about the working conditions and the income that they're still able to get, and of course the flexibility there. So here are some of the key findings that we have found in our study. So one of the big ones is that around half of the gig economy workers are the sole income earners in their family. This shows that essentially the dependence that workers have on their income from the gig economy and how important it is that they have access to this sort of work. The next would be the lack of a wage equivalent income floor. So we don't really have a national minimum wage in Bangladesh, but even then, what we found through our study is that there are massive variations in terms of what people can earn from working in gigs. So we've seen that people, and especially also that workers have to put in a crazy number of hours to just be able to make that decent wage. So overall, you may see that an Uber worker is making maybe 30,000 Dhaka a month, but you don't really get to hear about how many hours they're putting into it. And this also brings me to my next point, where there have been incidences of net negative income, where the total income derived from working in the gigs are actually lower than the overall costs of working in the gigs themselves. So that's a very concerning factor, and that, like, and as Raihan Bhai will elaborate on that more. And the fourth point was that there are many, many risks associated in working in gig work. There are risks of accidents, there are risks of just during COVID, like exposure to all the health risks, and yeah, and like platforms aren't always doing a proactive job in meeting that there's a vagueness or even absence of proper documentation or working conditions or apologies, of terms of engagement. So like there is a lack of clear contracts that workers can refer to that would give them some sort of rights or outline to them what the engagement of their work really is here. So I will pass it on to Raihan Bhai for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. I'll elaborate on some of the points mentioned by Ryan. So one of them is the interesting, two phenomena actually found in the first round of research, but this year there are more. The first one was the presence of intermediary between the gig workers and the platforms. And that is unique to Bangladesh and Indonesia. To a certain extent in India, but Bangladesh is probably more dominant. And there are three forms of engagement of intermediaries. For example, the first one is that someone has 5 cars and that is rented to 5 gig workers. And then either it is on a revenue sharing model or employee model, or the gig workers pay a fixed rent, and then that is deducted from his income. So there's 3 models of intermediation in these platforms in Bangladesh. And that actually adds to the precarious nature of the gig works, because the income is not always big, and they have to pay a large share of income. Probably this is one of the reasons that the net negative income phenomenon. The second one is the I think net negative income one. Out of 40 rideshare gig workers, 16 actually experienced net negative income. Interestingly, that is not prevalent in the food delivery or other delivery or domestic work gigs. So it is specifically pertinent to the rideshare, and the amount of net negative income ranges from 100 to 66,000+ Dhaka. And despite that, they're still engaged. And the reason behind this engagement that the upcoming days will be better. And possible reasons we try to find out. Of course, the first one is that the income sharing with the intermediaries, that's probably one of the major reasons. The second reason is that the maintenance cost of the vehicles, that is also came up among other three reasons. This, again, the net negative income phenomena is unique to Bangladesh, not present in other 36 countries studied by the Oxford Internet Institute. Taking away from this, I come back to these 2 points. Let's look at some impact of COVID-19 on the gig workers. The first one was on the impact on the income, and 90% of the gig workers faced income loss. In food delivery, in certain cases, they had more income. And many of us have been used to order food through Food Panda and other, Pathao foods and so on, Uber Eats. So that's corroborates. But you see that the income rise, income loss is more prominent in ride sharing compared to other components. And the spike here is in the ride share, where more than 30% experienced reduced income more than 50%. So that shows that during the COVID-19, there is severe income impact on the gig workers. And as mentioned by Ryan, that half of them actually is only income earners. You can imagine what situation they have been in. The next one was the working hours. Very interesting that for some of them, they had experienced same level of hours spent, and for others, an increased number of hours. And that is connected to probably ride shares who actually work lesser hours, but for others actually already have been working many hours and they didn't experience any change. The basic safety measures during COVID-19, you see the left side spikes are connected to all 3 types of platforms, and you see there's no actually precautions, or the safety measures did not reach all of the gig workers. As of you see that on the right-hand side, some of the gig workers received safety measures, including masks and sanitizers and so on, and that is more prominent for the food delivery gig workers. Now, let's come to the the challenging part. First one is the regulatory framework. In Bangladesh, although the number is big, they are not officially, gig workers are not officially recognized as a part of the even informal, workers. And the annex of the, list of the categories of the, workers in the labor law does not include gig workers yet. So that would be probably one of the major agenda for future, that how it can be a category, and then they might have better bargaining power with the platforms. The second one is that, as was mentioned by Ryan, there is a minimum floor income for, garments workers, 8,000 Dhaka. It is increased recently, 15,000 Dhaka. And the living wage is 21,000 Dhaka. So what we found that only a few platforms could reach the, living wage standard, but all of them was below living wage, but above minimum wage, if we take the the ready-made garments standard as a benchmark. So it shows that although there's a growing number of gig workers tend to come to this platform economy, and definitely it is going to grow further. But in terms of income level, we need to actually look at how we can improve. And finally, the power relation itself. You see that in a location-based work, the management and workers can meet face-to-face. They have opportunity to communicate and bargain. But in the gig economy, they have to sign up through an app. And only in case of some troubles, they try to reach out to a certain point placed in Dhaka city or outside Dhaka. And it is also difficult to convey their problems. So from that perspective, there is a firewall between platforms and the gig workers. So there's no room for negotiations, or there is no room for bargaining. So that is also probably one phenomenon we need to look at when we talk about the, regulatory frameworks. When you talk to the platforms are reluctant to, talk about the gig workers' working condition in general. There are some exceptions. And probably this is the first time they had to face questions, how do you care about your, team? But this year, when we approach them, we have better response in terms of, and they are thinking that, yes, it is important to also take care of the gig workers. And probably one of the reasons, anecdotally, if I say, that there is a tendency of bypassing the platforms, both by the ride sharers and the customers. And the platforms are losing out money for this phenomena. The question is why this is happening. Probably we didn't research it, but hypothetically, you can say that this is, Dr. Mirza actually the other day was telling that this is a phenomena like the weakest kind of revenge or something like that. I forgot the term actually. So I think this is something the platforms need to really look into deeply, how we can avoid that. Probably one of the reasons is the high commission, 25% officially, but there are some booking fee and other terms. That's why it is 33% around. So if they earn actually 500 taka, actually they are getting 270 or something like that. So there is a point of taking care of it. In terms of algorithmic governance also, again, it is under research area, that the design of the algorithm in a way controls the behavior of the, gig workers. And sometimes it is negatively influencing their well-being as well. So I'll probably stop here because a lot of questions are still answered in this particular area, gig workers research. So we're planning to conduct research and probably something collaborative with BIGD. So we may come up with more findings and creating a better kind of environment for dialogue, at least at the beginning, rather than having some action points to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahman. That was a very enlightening presentation. And I think you've highlighted some of the key points of what the gig economy, what kind there are, what challenges we face, how you've defined it very well in the platform economy with the 4 centers you said, labor, consumer, investment, and government. We will come back to the Q&A session. And right now, I'd like to move on to our second topic, which is, does platform economy enhance the well-being of workers? And we'd like to invite, I've been told that there is Salina Aziz from BIGD and Raisa Raimin from BIGD as well. So over to you, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks for the excellent presentation, Ryan Bhai, because this actually sets the context for our presentation. We are going to be talking to on the same topic, and I'll be commenting more of in depth. We'll be taking a closer look to the topic that has been raised by the previous presenters. Can I see the slides, please? So this paper, this platform economy enhance the well-being of the workers. This is a presentation from one of our ongoing research, and 4 of our colleagues, me and 3 of my colleagues are working on the presentations. And today, I, along with Raisa, will be presenting on behalf of the team. So, as we have already known that this sector has been expanding very fast globally and in Bangladesh. And what we have said that, what we have seen that platform industry, this digital market has made it very easy for us to respond to customers' demand, and they come up with quick and efficient solution. So this is one major feature that attracts people to platform, the consumers, and also for the workforce, it is a welcome change because globally it has came up with the solution to unemployment. People are getting employment, and at the same time, it is the commodification of labor. At the same time, what we have seen that even though it started in the northern countries, there has been a shift to platform work in the southern countries. Countries like Bangladesh are actually getting involved to platform work more and more. So the whole burden is shifting towards the southern countries. It's a welcome change for our countries because with the abundant labor force, we actually have this more people getting work, getting access to income. But at the same time, with this high penetration of informal labor force, many fear that platformization will actually will do nothing significant change in terms of workers' condition. It will just change the informalization to platformization. With this context, what we can see that in Bangladesh, Bangladesh is one of the major supplier of global online workforce. We actually tried to look at the numbers, more specifically, what is the size of online workforce in Bangladesh? What is the size of the platform economy? What is its economic contribution? And what we found that there is actually lack of macro level data. So we actually found some numbers when we tried to trace back. We actually got the newspaper reports and blog reports. There is not actual statistics we can rely on about the size of this market and the economic contribution. At the same time, there is a negligible governance research. So as the previous presenter said, that we didn't talk about platform workers at all. We talked about their economic contribution a bit, but not about what is happening to them actually. So we actually need governance related research. And on that note, I'd like to remind everyone about the previous inaugural session. We had Stephen Darkin, he was saying that one of the major risks of digitization is that we tend to think that innovate first and regulate later. But if we don't regulate now, we'll end up with a situation that would actually undermine the workers' right and working condition. With that note, I start to present our findings. I'm not going into details about platform economy. I think Ryan did it very well. So for our research, we are actually focusing on the on-demand apps, physical activities or services that are performed locally, and we are looking at ride services and delivery services. For this research, we are actually focusing on ride sharing and food delivery industries. We are looking at Pathao and Uber, both cars and bikes. And for food delivery, we actually choose 2 biggest platforms, so Food Panda and Pathao Foods. What are the research questions? So these are broadly what we tried to do in this paper. We are actually looking at formal and de facto regulation structures and policies, the workers and employees, workers-employers relationship and how it is being governed in the platform economy. We also look at like the issues of contentions between workers and platforms and the reason why this is happening. We look at algorithmic parameters. So how the algorithms set by the platforms affect workers' employment condition, their rights. And also, most importantly, we are looking at the existing coping strategies of workers, both individual level and at collective level. Methodology, we haven't done any surveys. So this is in-depth interviews with 40 platform workers. Interviews were like 1 hour on average long. And beside that, what we did is like we looked at the social, we have done a content analysis of Facebook groups of these platforms, available platforms for 3 years. And we also looked at media reports. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Like platform workers are not contractors, as said, they are individual independent contractors. And we all know, like in platform research, it often comes out that algorithmic governance is a term that apps are used to not manipulate, but to govern workers' working condition. And there is a certain issue that would be highlighted in our research, that there is an autonomy paradox. So platforms are promising their flexibility and freedom to their workers, but actually how far this claim is true, we are trying to assess from this point of view. So this platform regulation, as Ryan Bhai said, that there is one single policy gazette available only to govern the ride-sharing industry. This is Ride-Sharing Service Policy Gazette of 2017, which puts this Ministry of Commerce and overall in charge of the platform related regulations, and BRTA will be specifically responsible for governing the ride-sharing sector. Bangladesh Labor Act is the key policy document that actually looks after the workers' well-being, if rights are being upheld or not. But as it is not, platform workers are not classified in the labor law classification. And what we found that the policy, in terms of regulations, the measures are rather reactive than proactive. So I'd like to mention this e-valley scam. So we didn't have any guidelines, governance mechanism for the e-commerce. Once we had this come, following up with that, the government actually came up with a policy. We also think there is a reluctance towards imposing proper laws because this is also an emerging sector. Government haven't really noticed what is happening to this sector. So there is a reluctance, there are some lobbying, and platforms are actually quite enjoying this status quo because it gets them, it actually helps them to get away with tax evasion, and also as the employment conditions are not really specified, they are not doing anything about this. The regulation we have, this policy gazette, is also a very short document. It actually prioritizes customers' grievances, not workers, so nothing on workers. Also, some of the policies which are there are actually not feasible to maintain. We all live in Dhaka, we know, like for example, I say that cars, I don't know why this is moving. Cars must be running all the time. It cannot park anywhere at any point, apart from passenger pickup and drop, which is actually not feasible for the Uber drivers or Pato drivers in Dhaka. We also see that some of the policies which are stipulated in the Gazette, it's not actually followed by the platforms because there is a provision of MOU signing between drivers and platform and vehicle owners, but I don't think this has been maintained. None of our respondents say this, they have actually signed any MOU. Also, there is a provision of giving 1 month's notice before termination, but through apps, suspensions are happening automatically. So we didn't find any evidence that this has been followed. Before I finish, this is the repetition of Ryan's point, but I would like to add that platforms are actually, people are attracted to platforms because it gives them employment opportunities. It's also because of the fact that the skill requirements are very low in terms of like when they're driving, they need to know driving, but for the delivery agencies, there is no skill requirement. At the same time, there is no selection process. People can get a job without any interview or selection process, and flexibility is also another option. And countries like Bangladesh, we have these very limited opportunities for part-time jobs. So this is one feature that actually people are getting attracted to platforms, because for students, the underemployed and transitional workforce, this gives a chance to get some earning. I'll hand over to Raisa for the next slides. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for the floor, Dr. Kabir and Selinapa. So is that better? Okay. So taking over from Selinapa, I'm going to be talking more about the empirical findings of our research. So one of the questions we asked our respondents in the interviews was, how do they perceive their employment? What do they think about their employment and their relationship with the platforms? So as you know, platforms refer to their workers as partners, be it delivery partners or driver partners. However, we found that workers actually could rather consider themselves to be commission-based employees. So they find that, you know, they have no attachment with the platforms, and there's no brand value that is attached with the platforms. So they feel no ownership over being part of the platform. So they really don't feel like they're partners. They feel that, you know, workers' welfare is not of a priority to platforms. One of the many reasons is that they have no benefits. So platforms are adamant on saying that they're not employees. They're, you know, they're freelance contractors. They're not employees, which allows them to not provide any benefits to the workers. I'm just going to skip over this for time constraint. So the existing business model as it stands in platform work is not conducive to workers' well-being. The business model compels workers to work more. And platforms promise workers freedom and flexibility in terms of how they work and when they work. But the question is, how free are they really? So we found that in our interviews, there is limited flexibility. For example, with food delivery workers, if I'm a food delivery worker, I can't just decide if I'm a part-timer, I'm gonna do 1 hour during a lunch shift and maybe 2 hours in the evenings. No, you have to select your shifts in the week beforehand. And if for whatever reason, I'm not being able to fulfill all my shifts in the following week, I will be penalized by the platforms. And so the flexibility is really an illusion. In terms of wages, you know, the previous presentation, they talked a little bit about that, but wages in the platform economy are very personalized. They're really personalized wages in that they're determined by a multitude of factors. One of those many factors is the ratings. So I'm sure most of you in this room have used at some point any of these platforms that we're talking about today. And you'll know that most of these platform workers on the apps have a rating, usually out of 5. And in ride sharing, for example, we, the customers, give them a rating out of 5. But what we don't maybe always know is that it has a direct influence on workers' freedom and their well-being, because their rating really impacts their earning potential. So that is the wage scheme, which is, you know, set by individual platforms. And then in addition to that, there is a separate bonus scheme, which is also individual to the platforms and unique to every platform. And the bonus scheme also is not a set bonus scheme per hour or per day or whatever. Rather, it is designed in a way that the more you work, the more you incrementally earn at higher rates. So algorithmic governance. We've heard about this today. And what is algorithmic governance? It is really central to the way platform economy operates. And algorithms are, they're set by parameters which are determined by the platforms, and they're not really worker friendly. So what we're saying about ratings and you know, where we, the customers, can rate their services, the riders, the drivers' ratings also depend on other factors, and that all so the higher the rating, the more calls you get. And the more calls you get, the more you earn. And vice versa, the lower your rating, the lower calls you get, and therefore your income potential decreases. So it's just a quote to wrap up what we've been saying from one of our respondents, is the more you cancel, the lower the rating, and the lower the rating, the fewer the trips. It's no surprise that Workers feel that their commission rates that platforms take from them are too high. But the problem is that there is a clear, there's a lack of transparency in the way that platforms deduct charges from them, because we find that actually they end up taking more than 25%. So given all of this, workers have found a way to organize themselves both individually and collectively. They found ways to cope. One of the ways individually where they managed to cope is by providing a lot of offline services. Dr. Raihan spoke a bit about that, and he explained essentially what is known as the phenomena weapons of the weak, where the weak are essentially trying to protect themselves by fighting against the big corporations. So in terms of collective strategies, you know, like we said, that these are location-based services, but workers in the platform industry don't have a regular office like you and I do. Like this is, you know, BRAC building, and there's employees of BRAC who come and congregate here. Workers don't have that, but even then, they've found ways to collectively organize in certain locations across the city. Social media is another way which has allowed workers to transcend the physical barriers of there not being a physical location, and they've managed to collectively organize that way. So finally, I just want to conclude by saying that we found that, you know, in terms of their employment status and benefits, there's conflicting aspirations of workers. Because in one hand, we found that they want the benefits that regular employment offers, but at the same time, they don't necessarily want to be known as employees of the platforms they work for. In terms of raising collective voices, our findings have also been very mixed. And ultimately, you know, the platform economy workers still have a very weak bargaining position. And finally, I'd like to conclude with that technology should have improved our lives. It's supposed to make our lives easier and better. But in the case of platform workers, that hasn't happened. And as Dr. Durkon said in his keynote opening speech, you know, innovate first, regulate later. Well, in the case of the Bangladesh platform economy, it's really time that we regulate now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Raisa and Ms. Salina Aziz. That was a great informative presentation. In the interest of time, we will move on to the next one, which is digitalization in the informal sector through the lens of Kormo. And I'd like to invite Mr. Tamid bin Mahmood, Research Associate, BIGD, BRAC University, to give his speech.
Hello. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. And I'm going to be presenting a study that we've done together with my colleagues Nutun Farakapu and Jisan Abedin on digitalization in the informal sector. And we did it through the lens of Kormo, which is a digital platform app. Okay, so just before we dip our toes into the presentation, we'll just go quickly over some terminologies. So for formal employment, we mean it consists of any sort of employment where there's a contractual agreement between an individual and then an organization. For example, as a research associate, I have a contractual agreement with BIGD where I have a agreed upon setup of working hours, salary, and benefits as well, such as paid leaves and such. On the other hand, for informal employment, there are no formally regulated structures, so that they don't actually have any fixed amount of working hours or any agreed upon monthly salaries or the benefits that we are privileged with. So formalizing the informal sector has been at the heart of many poverty reduction programs, but it is a very difficult notion to aim for a complete formalization because it might do more harm than good. According to the labor force survey of 2016 and 17 of Bangladesh, we found out that the informal sector employs about 85.1% of the total workforce. In 2010, more than 40% of the gross value added of Bangladesh was contributed by the informal sector. So the informal sector is actually very essential for the survival of the extremely poor in our nation. But we can enable these informal businesses to access formal opportunities through introducing digital technologies into them. So mediating digital platforms and such would help to formalize, digitalize these informal sector businesses. Oh, sorry. So what are the merits behind digitalization in this sector? One of the key issues in this workspace is that the workers do not have a stable livelihood. Let's take an example, for example, the day laborers of Dhaka. You can see them every morning gathered at different locations, such as the Link Road or Notun Bazar, because they're waiting to be approached by labor contractors to be hired for the day. So at any adverse weather conditions, also rain, will be there every day because they don't know where they have to go for that day. The jobs are available. There's a lack of information in between. So these delay in matching the available workforce with the job openings is an indication of market inefficiency. So digital platforms enable to help alleviate this issue, because through the digital platform, you can access the information where your job is, where the work is available, and you can see what kind of pay rate they're offering and what sort of hours that they're asking for before you agree to it. One of the examples is Fundis that's in Kenya, which connects artisans, local fixers with clients on a daily basis. Another, which is a very another important issue that comes up in the informal sector, is that we don't have any, for us, we have a very good proof of work experience. We have our CVs. When you apply for a job, we can see what our past record was and what sort of experience we have. But in the informal sector, there isn't any way to assess someone's past experience, or for you to actually show your skills through any proof. So digital platforms like the ones mentioned in the previous speeches, those we've actually gone over just a couple of minutes ago. There's a rating system, and then you have a profile where you have rating based on your based on ratings. So those act sort of a proof of your work experience, and that's something that there's one of the merits of digitization in the informal sector. Right. So we're going to look through these advantages through Kormo, which was an online job matching platform for day laborers. It was the idea came from Vicky Russell, who was the former director of global operations at Google, and he piloted this in Bangladesh in collaboration with BRAC Skills Development Program at the end of 2016. And he pitched this idea to Google. 20 program is basically an incubator program inside Google where they fund their employees' ideas, innovative ideas. So this is the concept flow, process flow of Kormo. This is what Google had in mind when they thought of this piloting this. So they would have a digital app where both the workers and the day laborers will be onboarded. So any employer would post a job, and he will automatically be matched with the employees, or with the day laborers that are matched according to his needs. And those laborers then would be notified, and they can accept the job or they can reject it. So that way there would be an autonomous system here for matching your needs with available workforce. But soon after they started the pilot, Google realized that there is a huge lack in digital literacy with both the employers of the day laborers and also day laborers within themselves. So they couldn't actually get enough traction to on the app itself. So you can see there's a mediating body where they use a call center centric approach. So the employers would then post the job on the Kormo app, and then the call center would inform the workers about those jobs, And if they confirm, and the call center would call back the employers, and that's how the matching was done. Even with this system in place, Kormo saw a lot of success. It was very easy to find jobs. The workers didn't have to, again, roam around and stand beside the roads for them to find their daily wage jobs. Again, with the rating system, anyone who do the good satisfactory job would be rated higher. And it was actually found in Kormo's pilot phase that the contractors are willing to pay up to 30% more for any worker that has a very good reputation. And hence, so if you do good job consistently, you would be paid higher. And also, you would also have a digital profile in place, which was actually very important for people that moved around or had to travel to different locations. And this was an experience that Biki Research, who was the idea, one who pitched this idea. He shared that he saw a worker who traveled, I think, from Narayanganj to Dhaka. So he back in Narayanganj, he had a more, he knew the people there. He worked there for a long time, and he actually was paid a lot more. He had to move to Dhaka because his wife got sick, and he has to stay near the Kormo police station for that reason. So in that place, everyone was new to him. So he had to start from scratch again. His pay was, again, at the very bottom of the scale. So if he had a digital profile there, that could attest to his skills or abilities. Again, Google is a tech company. So they launch programs that are global, and they want to scale it up. So their reason for piloting Bangladesh was if it was scalable, then they would spread it across the other places as well. So they had to, for that reason, they had to eliminate the call center. It wasn't Google's business idea. Google wanted to push an autonomous business. So then, again, they repeatedly tried to take out the call center and onboard the workers completely into the Kormo app. But there exists technophobia. Technophobia is basically an irrational fear for new technologies. The workers were not used to this sort of automated job systems. They would, so the Kormo actually awarded some of the workers who were very high rated with smartphones and trained them even to use the Kormo app there. But they wouldn't do that. They would still prefer getting calls from the call center about their jobs. And it was an interesting finding that they would use the smartphones for other, for media, social media and other apps, but they wouldn't use the job app. And so since the Google couldn't take out the call center, it wasn't full automation as Google wanted to have, which is why at the end of 2018, mid 2018, they decided to shut down Kormo for the day laborer, and they switched up their business model, and they targeted a different population afterwards. So I would just say that from the lessons from here would be lessons from here would be we'd have to first assess the digital literacy of the target population first before we actually go into it. Google actually had a complete idea about the app, and then they came into Bangladesh and launched it. And afterwards, when it didn't work, they put in a call center in. But you would have to assess your target population's literacy rate before doing that. And here, since you could see that there were successes, people were getting daily jobs, and Kormo actually worked here for 1.5 years, and people were getting jobs regularly. But it's not full automation that's going to work in a place where digital literacy is very low. Hence, for future work in this workspace, there has to be some sort of a handholding, that call-centric approach, or somewhere where it is a tech-enabled operation, but it's not going to be a full automation. With that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very informative deliberation, Mr. Mahmood. We move on to the last part of our panel discussion, which will be followed by a discussant. We'd like to now invite Mr. Mohammad Tariq Hassan to tell us about working without a boss in Dhaka, effective labor ratings and temporalities in the digital platforms. Over to you, Mr. Hassan.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible. Today I was going to talk about I was going to talk about ride-hailing platform workers, but from the two previous papers, we have heard a lot of things about it. Many of the things I was also going to talk about. But being an anthropologist, I can give you some of the workers' experiences, not in numbers. So I'll share some of the workers' feelings about the platform they work for in their own words. And so should I go there? So as a recap, I'll start by mentioning by recapping two features of these platforms, ride-hailing platforms. One is everyone can work during the time of their preference and duration, and what is employee anymore, but they are independent contractors. So what does this mean? It kind of transform the world of work. So in this world of work, I'll talk about what form of effective labor is there. I'll talk about what I mean by effective labor in a second. So in this presentation today, then I'll talk about the overall dynamics of the platform and make some concluding remarks. So the primary objectives of this paper was to understand how do the workers evaluate their position in the platform economy's work ecosystem. Is the platform economy as flexible as it sounds? To this end, I collected data during August 2020 and February 2021, and 50 unstructured interviews were conducted and a snowball method was followed. Just to clarify, what is effective labor? Michael Hart defines effective labor as work that, and I quote, a feeling of ease, well-being, satisfaction, excitement, passion, even a sense of connectedness or community. So the idea of effective labor is highly relevant in the ride-hailing platforms, as one of the promotional videos of Pathao titled "Responsibilities of a Rider" starts with the welcome note, "Hello Pathao heroes of Bangladesh." Then the video explains why the Pathao riders are the hero. The heroes come forward to help those in need without being asked to do so. The Pathao riders have come forward to solve one of the biggest problems of the Bangladeshi cities, that is traffic congestions. But the heroes have some responsibilities. So the duties of a Pathao rider include making sure to reach the passengers safely to their destination. And most importantly, the video states, and I quote, every day, at least once, think of what you would expect if you were the passenger, to the riders. So as indicated here, when the ride-hailing platforms started operating in Bangladesh, they introduced several expectations to the potential customers and the workers. Customers were promised to experience owning their own cars during the point-to-point rides. And contrarily, the drivers were placed to a possibility of earning and working where they would be their own boss. The technological revolution did not only provide a mechanical solution, for instance, to the transportation problems in Dhaka. Instead, it has introduced certain forms of labor, sociality, a mechanism of control, and disjunctive temporalities that may inform our understanding of the contemporary technology as such. So ride-hailing platforms are growing by the day in Bangladesh. I'm skipping the numbers for the sake of time. But for this paper, an understanding of the business model is important. If we analyze the business model, we'll identify that the digital ride-hailing platforms serve as a medium of contact between consumers and those able and willing to work freelance. For instance, the ride-hailing platforms enable those having a car to share the ride with someone for a payment while traveling towards the destination. By sharing, both are benefited. However, if we look at the working conditions that these platforms have called for, it will appear as a pervasive form of capitalism. The paper will provide evidence of this, and briefly I will mention three aspects. Firstly, it transfers the burden of operating cost. Ride-hailing platforms require the riders to own their personal vehicles. This is an important aspect as investment risk shift to the individual from the organization. Secondly, the platforms are coercive in nature, as two of the previous speakers have also mentioned, because of the system of rating. And with the provisions of benefit for increased number of services provided within a time frame, the platforms coercively engage workers to drive for long hours. Thirdly, the platforms get waiver from responsibilities. The platform workers are treated as if they are into a 0-hour employment contract. Eventually, they endure lack of fair pay, inflexibility, no fringe benefits, stress because of constant evaluation, and occupational safety and health risk. Now I'll briefly describe how the platforms promote effective labor. The drivers of the ride-hailing platforms are not expected only to drive, but must connect with the customers with courteousness and care. As I mentioned earlier, ride-hailing platforms generate a professional identity for the workers and how they should treat the passengers. Thus, it also shows the experiences a passenger could expect while requesting a ride via Patha or Uber, for instance. And the training videos of the ride-hailing platforms promote particular features that the drivers must uphold, and the platforms have diverse mechanisms to ensure it. For example, if the drivers do not accept trip requests or request the passengers to cancel any trip, the passengers complain about it, and the drivers get a warning from the platform for giving an unpleasant experience. And in all the training content Patha or Uber promotes, and I quote, "A person's real character is revealed by how one behaves. A person can become admirable by talking nicely, displaying good behavior, and appearing decent. So we expect you will present nice and decent behavior to every passengers of yours," unquote. Also, as the figure shows in the slide, we can see a dramatic reorganization of the work itself, where the effective labor is significant. Now I will describe the overall dynamics of the platform economy that will indicate that the platforms create an illusion of freedom. Three features attract the workers to ride-hailing platforms. There is no boss, easy return or profit, and inclusiveness, as anyone can join anytime without much hassle. And one Uber worker said, and I quote him, "In any other job, there is no end to a workday till one achieves the day's target. But here, I'm on my own. There is no pressure here. I can choose my work hours as per my wish." And then commented, and I quote him, "In other businesses, you have to invest much more for a smaller profit. Here, by a small investment, you can start getting profit in no time at all," unquote. However, oftentimes, drivers or bikers face tough time from the passengers. As Uber biker mentioned, and I quote, "Fare calculation is done by the platform, but many passengers do not want to pay if the fare rises from the estimated cost shown on the app. In case of a low fare compared to the estimated fare, we cannot do anything, but passengers usually do not want to pay the increased fare. Sometimes passengers request a ride, but do not show up or receive our calls after we reach the pickup location. The company does not do anything in such cases," unquote. And passengers sometimes make the drivers wait at the pickup point or request the drivers to make an extra stop during the ride to buy something. Or they set up a pickup location or destination somewhere having no accessible road. In such cases, drivers lose working time. If the drivers refuse to wait, passengers behave rudely, and sometimes the drivers face legal action for wrongful parking. And the process of seeking aid from the platform is not convenient for the drivers and riders. And I quote one of the Patha bike driver, "For any assistance, we need to go to the platform office, but I do not want to go there because going there will cost me more." This was echoed by another driver, and I quote, "For any need, if you call the contact center, we do not get to talk immediately. Sometimes 10 taka is lost before we can even start talking. So many times we ignore many problems about pickup, waiting time, or fare disputes." Besides in these digital platforms, workers' job performance was evaluated primarily based on their customer satisfaction scores. The drivers are expected to adopt particular affective behavior, courtesy, familiarity, friendliness, helpfulness, and above all, care. Thus, underscoring the centrality of certain modes of affect to their self-constitution and self-regulating laboring subject. I have a table here that roughly compares platform and similar non-platform jobs of driving for like private employers. And it was found that there is more stress in work, more rigorous performance evaluation, more possibilities of disputes, investment risk, variable income, no possibility of social support. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the platforms placed a prosperous future for the workers. But especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we identified three tendencies in case of ride-hailing platforms. First tendency is indebtedness among the workers. Due to business model of the ride-hailing platforms, the drivers fell into debt trap during the shutdown. The drivers that work using the ride-hailing platforms use the platform as a way out of economic crisis. But the pandemic-induced shutdown, on the contrary, forced them into debt, as many bought the vehicle taking a loan, and during the shutdown could not return the loan, but had to take out more loan. And second tendency is about the platform's diversification of services. During the lockdown period, ride-hailing platforms diversified their services. For example, Pathao had launched an on-demand essentials and grocery delivery service, as well as delivery of pharmaceutical products and others. Lastly, there is a post-pandemic threat for the workers. In the post-pandemic condition, for many workers, the long-cherished middle-class stable life appears unattainable. So the promised transition to progress and financial development is in jeopardy. And additionally, the platforms give targets, as we have heard from the previous speakers as well. The platforms give targets of different magnitude that the drivers must complete in a stipulated time. Because of the rating system and targets of the platforms, drivers must work during the so-called peak hours, and they must continuously work. This means that sometimes they worked while their families slept. Conversely, they rested when their families were going about their life. So they missed a lot of their social life because of this rating and possibilities of earning more money because of the bonuses of targets. And the platform workers do not see themselves working long-term for the platform. Instead, they aim to save enough money to start a small business in a few years. It is primarily because of their experience in the platform that they did not want to continue this work. A driver reflected, and I quote, "If anyone work for a company, they get service benefit during changing jobs or retirement. However, even though we will labor for many years in these platforms, we would receive no retirement benefits." And the responses remind us that any work arrangement that has the potential for de-arrangements or rearrangements within its own functioning. So whatever it was promised in the functioning of the platforms, many things have changed for the workers. And the flexibility that looked to be a plus has left them vulnerable to any sort of disruption, as we have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. While these private workers of the private employers got their salaries or other social help, the platform workers did not receive much help from the platform or the government, as they are not treated as employees, rather independent contractors. Hence, it can be argued that this form of democratization of work has stripped workers from many of their rights. In conclusion, what I want to say is that the COVID-19 pandemic also revealed that the social support is minimal for the platform workers, as they are not classified as employees. And these situations reveal the contradictions of this sharing platform economy and its illusion of freedom, whereby the exploitative and coercive labor process is not as directly visible as it is with industrial workers. And hence the paper try to trace how relations of affect are constructed through labor processes and allows us to rethink the relationship between effective labor and technology as such. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be very happy if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of our discussion, and at this moment, I'd like to invite Fahim Mashroor. He has heard all the panel discussions deliberate, and we would like for you, Fahim, to share your thoughts with us. And if we have time, we will go over for some Q&A. Over to you, Fahim. I can't hear you, so if you can come up on the panel, please. Yes. No.
Soniapa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so how much time do I have? Because there is someone who is kind of showing the placard that 2 minutes, 3 minutes left. So you can just say that how 5 minutes or 15? Oh, that is a lot. 10 minutes.
So take it up if you need. We have to close at 1:30, and if we have time, we'll do Q&A, but we'd like to hear from you first.
Sure. Okay, so Soniapa, is it okay? Like I can mix both Bangla and English, or like from the audience, because I can see most of the people can actually speak in Bangla. Okay.
Yeah, this is being recorded, so I guess as much as English as possible, but up to you. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks. Okay. So I have been kind of hearing. I think there were kind of six presentations for last kind of 1.5 hours. So all of the presentations are very kind of precise. So thanks. I think this is probably the first time that such kind of academic or data-based kind of empirical survey-based findings are being presented. And so that is a very good start. But I think there will be a lot of kind of debates, lot of kind of discussions that needs to be done, particularly in the gig economy and the platform economy. So I have few kind of observations based on kind of that we already had. So one thing is still unclear. Like আমার কাছে মনে হচ্ছে যে আমরা যখন gig economy বলছি বা platform economy বলছি, somehow we are actually focusing on a kind of only things like Uber driver, Pathao rider, delivery driver. I think gig economy is much beyond that. First, say for example, even a kind of restaurant or a kind of home kitchen, a housewife who is actually producing something and selling it to platform, whatever the platform is, I personally think that she is also a gig worker. A Facebook seller working from home, sourcing things or kind of making some things and selling it over Facebook or over Daras, or even like we also maintain a marketplace like Ajker Deal. There are a lot of marketplaces. So I think he or she is also a kind of a gig worker. So I think it is probably important first to kind of define who are the gig workers. So in this whatever the sessions we had, I think we are probably focusing on a too narrow base. So my personal suggestion would be to kind of expand it as much as possible, because the issues are the same, whether it is a rider or a kind of Facebook informal kind of entrepreneur. I think it is almost, and even a rider is also two-man entrepreneur. Like sometimes we say that he's a worker, a person who is actually having a bike, just whether it is offline or online using a platform, to me, on his own, and he's actually investing, he's kind of producing value for himself, for the society, and for others. He's giving a service to others. Why wouldn't we actually term him an entrepreneur? Then this is a kind of legal profession. This is a kind of should be recognized in that way. So second is, I think a lot of kind of discussion have been there, like আমরা কি এই ইন্ডাস্ট্রিটাকে we would actually regulate, or we will just keep it unregulated. So I think this is something that is very important, particularly আমাদের যখন policy makerদের সাথে এনগেজমেন্টে যেতে হবে, তখন normally our policy makers are always very kind of, they don't know how to regulate, but they always like to regulate. So that is one of the issues, and one of the speaker has mentioned about the evaluating thing or whatever. I think like even they would have regulated, they would have, the result would have been same because they would not be able to properly regulate. So this is one thing. Another is kind of, should we keep it at formal or should we actually much more formalize it? And this is something that is also related with the other regulation or non-regulation. Once you regulate or once you make it formal, অন্যান্য countryতে what we have experienced that when you make something formal, the kind of players or beneficiaries get lot of kind of benefits. আমাদের দেশে কিন্তু ব্যাপারটা উল্টা হয়. Just something to give an example. Government in the recent budget has mentioned that if you want to sell something online, you need to pay your return. Unless you pay return, you cannot sell online. So যেই মহিলাটা এখন বাসায় বসে কাজ করতেছিল and they are actually earning a living out of this thing, now the kind of very income of that person is actually challenged because সে এখন যেহেতু ইনফর্মাল ছিল, আগে সমস্যা ছিল না, এখন তাকে ফর্মাল হয়ে তাকে রিটার্ন সাবমিট করা ছাড়া সে মানে অনলাইনে টাকা রিসিভ করতে পারবেন না। হ্যাঁ, তো আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে অনেক সময় আমরা জাস্ট মানে অনেক সময় মনে করি যে না যত বেশি ফর্মাল হবে তত তার লাভ হবে। It can be other way around. Sometimes making it formal creates lot of kind of nuisance for a lot of other things, particularly with regard to tax and all other things. So আমরা যদি এখন রাস্তাঘাটে একজন মুদির দোকান বা চার বিক্রেতাকে বলতাম তোমার টিন সার্টিফিকেট লাগবে, তোমার রিটার্ন সাবমিট লাগবে, সে এটা পাবে কই, তাই না? তো ultimately we would actually not help him. We would actually destroy his income potential. So I think this angle needs to be also looked at. Okay, now my main issue. I think like a lot of the discussions, what I have actually learned that or actually observed that is focused on how like the working condition of the gig workers, whether it's a driver or delivery man or whatever, and whether they're being exploited or whatever. Of course, there is an issue. At the end of the day, in a free market economy, there are kind of three players. Okay, one is kind of like what quote unquote kind of capitalist type of kind of entrepreneurs, যারা বড় প্ল্যাটফর্ম বানায় বা যারা বড় ইন্ডাস্ট্রি বানাচ্ছে। Another is যারা ওই প্ল্যাটফর্ম বা ইন্ডাস্ট্রি কে কাজ করছে বা they are giving their kind of physical service, physical effort and get a living out of that. There will be always a friction. ছাড়া এই গত হাজার বছরের ক্যাপিটালিজমের মধ্যে there will always be this kind of friction. Some will say that we are being like unfairly treated, and some will say that no, you are being treated, we are not getting our due share or whatever. So এই ফিকশন থাকবেই, there is nothing new. অতএব আমাদের এই নিউ ডিজিটাল প্ল্যাটফর্মও এরকম ফিকশন থাকবে, and there is on top of that the society, the state, or the like policy makers like or kind of intellectuals like who probably are in this group. So আমার কাছে মনে হয় আমাদের যারা পলিসি মেকার বলি বা ইন্টেলেকচুয়াল বা যারা সোশ্যাল ইনফ্লুয়েন্সার, তাদের আসলে এই দুই স্পেকট্রামের দুই পার্সপেক্টিভ কি আসলে ইম্পর্টেন্ট টু আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড। দেখেন আমি যদি বলি জাস্ট মানে হোয়াট ইজ দ্য মেজর প্রবলেম ইন দিস কান্ট্রি কারেন্টলি, আমি জাস্ট যেহেতু আই এম অলসো ইন দ্য জব মার্কেট, আই হ্যাভ বিন রানিং a job platform for last 20 years. The biggest problem of the society or kind of in the economy is basically graduate unemployment. এটা তো আমরা সবাই স্বীকার করি, তাই না? আমরা হয়তো এখন তো ফেস করতেছি যে আমাদের ডলার নাই whatever, but it has been the unemployment, particularly youth graduate unemployment, is one of the biggest problem in the society, and it is almost a kind of time bomb. Why we have been saying that for some time? Because দেখেন আমাদের non graduate unemployment is very low in the country. It is lower than even like 4-5%. এখন গার্মেন্টস কোম্পানিগুলো লোক পাচ্ছে না, তাই না? But when you become a graduate, এবং আমাদের গত 10-15 বছরে নাম্বার অফ গ্র্যাজুয়েটস হ্যাভ অ্যাকচুয়ালি ইনক্রিজড। আমরা জানি যে আমাদের প্রাইভেট ইউনিভার্সিটি, কলেজ, অনেক গ্র্যাজুয়েট সেক্টর, এখন কিন্তু নাম্বার অফ গ্র্যাজুয়েটস ইজ অলমোস্ট kind of 5 lakh per year. But our formal economy, because I am in this industry, I know our formal economy can absorb only 20% of these graduates in the market. So we are actually left, this kind of 80% of the graduates are left without anything. And that's why ILO বলেন, World Bank বলেন, economists বলেন, even BIDS has made a study recently which says that Bangladesh has got the highest number of unemployed graduates in the world. It is more than 60%. So when people graduate, they don't get any job. This is the biggest problem of the society. We all know. And I think that government and policymakers also know that. But the issue becomes how to actually get them engaged in the society. Otherwise, there will be a lot of issues like drugs, terrorism, and a lot of other things. So a perspective, there can be one solution that, okay, we send our people abroad. So we have been doing that. প্রচুর লোকজন বিদেশ যাচ্ছে and they are actually earning. But we also know that সেই সকল জায়গাতেও there is huge amount of issues with regard to working conditions. And we of course have to say that about that. It's not that we should not say about it. We only look for dollar or employment. We have to say that. But at the end of the day, ওই সেক্টরগুলিতেও কিন্তু প্রবলেম আছে. So there is also, আমি যদি একটা উদাহরণ দেই, দেখেন রায়হান ভাই একটু আগে একটু খুব ভালো কথা বলছে, নেগেটিভ ইনকাম। That problem is also prevalent in overseas employment. There are cases যেখানে একজন লোক বিদেশে যাওয়ার পরে 3-4 লাখ টাকা খরচ করে, তার কিন্তু 2 বছর পর্যন্ত সে নেগেটিভ ইনকামে থাকে। So we have to also keep that into consideration. Whereas the cost of migration is much higher. আমরা স্টাডি করেছি, আমরা গত কয়েকদিন ধরে একটা ক্যাম্পেইন চালাচ্ছিলাম যে if you have a kind of cycle and if you have a smartphone, you can earn 30,000 টাকা per month. So what we have seen that একটা বিদেশে এমপ্লয়মেন্টের জন্য তার যে টাকাটা ইনভেস্ট করছে সেই টাকাটা রিকভার করতে লাগছে মিনিমাম 12 months, whereas in a geek world, in a বাংলাদেশে কি করে, সে যদি এখন একটা সাইকেল চালায় রাইডারে কাজ করে, that person can actually earn enough to kind of use that kind of like earn that money in maximum 3 months. 3 months সে ওই ইনভেস্টমেন্টটাকে রিকভার করতে পারে। তো সেই পার্সপেক্টিভে আই থিংক উই অলসো নিড টু বি হ্যাভ এ কম্পারেটিভ কাইন্ড অফ শুড আই স্টপ রাইট নাও অর আই ক্যান হ্যাভ, বিকজ আই হ্যাভ ফিউ আদার ইস্যুস। ওকে, সো আই ক্যান স্টপ হিয়ার।
Thank you.
That's part মনে হয়েছে যে we need to kind of be a little speak that আমরা কি শুধুমাত্র of course we have to talk about the human rights issue or labor rights issue, whatever, but our challenge is also, bigger challenge is to create much more employment, because our formal sector cannot actually absorb that amount of graduates who are coming out. Among gig economy, it is a kind of good source of graduate employment, graduate informal employment. So আমার কাছে মনে হয় আমরা যদি ওভার রেগুলেট করে ফেলি at this stage, we might actually create a much bigger problem of not creating enough employment. So a perspective, I had some few others like observations. I don't have that much time, but I think we need to look the whole thing from a kind of holistic macro perspective, where gig economy can play a major driving role in solving a major problem in the society, which is basically graduate unemployment. Thanks.
Thank you, Fahim. Thank you. That was a very crisp summary of what was presented. And I am not sure if we have time for Q&A, because we have about 3 minutes. So I'll ask the organizers to, the moderator, the MC who came back up, if you can come up and see, since I cannot see the audience. Are we doing Q&A or are we wrapping it up now?
But we're going to have a just 5-minute Q&A from the audience.
I don't know if you heard our tech desk, but we are going to move forward with Q&A before lunch for 5 minutes. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I hear you. Do you want to control the Q&A? Because I will not be able to see who's raising their hand, so I'll pass it to you.
Yeah. If anyone has questions, please raise your hands.
I think the question is really, I think really about, I think the last I couldn't capture the name of the discussant. BD jobs. Sorry, Kina. Yes. Anyway, so I was just wondering, you did not really elaborate on, and of course, graduate unemployment is the biggest challenge, no question about it, and I fully agree with you about premature regulation. But I wonder if there are ways in which digitalization opens up opportunities for informal sector to have other ways, more innovative ways of thinking about labor rights as well. So are there ways in which digitalization opens up opportunities to think about labor right issues, worker right issues differently compared to the way we traditionally think about it? So I wonder whether you have any thoughts on that. Thank you.
It's a very important question. This was something that I was just trying to kind of propose for time shortage. I couldn't, but I can take this opportunity. I think like there are a lot of things that in a very positive way that kind of benefit can be given to this kind of digital labor force. One of the things that দেখেন আমাদের overall society, আমাদের financial ecosystem is dependent. আমরা জানি যে যখন আমরা ব্যাংক লোনের জন্য যাই বা whatever যাই, আমাদের কিন্তু সবসময় হচ্ছে অ্যাসেট বেস, ফিজিক্যাল অ্যাসেট বেসড একটা ইকোসিস্টেম আমাদের ওভারঅল। আমি এটাকে ব্যাংক আমাকে লোন দিবে কি দিবে না, but these digital kind of workers or whatever entrepreneurs, আমরা যাই বলি না কেন, everything of what they are doing in a kind of Uber or in a kind of Facebook or whatever, this is a kind of digital data. This data can be assetized. This data can be collateralized. So they are সে এখন একটা লোককে এই মহাখালী থেকে টাউন বাজার নিয়ে যাচ্ছে এবং সে যে কাস্টমারের সাথে ভালো ব্যবহার করছে, এই যে আমরা একটু আগে রেটিং নিয়ে কথা বলছিলাম, অফকোর্স রেটিং হ্যাজ গট এ সাইকোলজিক্যাল থিং, বাট সে যে পাস্ট রেটিং পেলো, আই থিঙ্ক দিস শুড বি রিকগনাইজ। দিস data has a tremendous value in terms of increasing the credibility of that person to even a bank to get a credit card, or even এই লোকটা কিন্তু সারা জীবন গিগ ওয়ার্কার থাকবে না, সে কিন্তু একটা চাকরিতে যাবে আজ থেকে 2 বছর পরে। তখন যে চাকরি এমপ্লয়ার দিবে, তখন কিন্তু সে যদি দেখে যে এই ছেলেটা 2 বছর কাজ করেছে and he has got very good rating in customer, like মানে pleasing the customer, good communication, that data should be interoperable so that employer তাকে এটার উপর ভিত্তি করে চাকরি দিতে পারে। So I think like we need to think from a data assetization perspective to make their life much better in the future.
Okay, with that, we're going to break for lunch. After lunch sessions. Oh, okay, right. Ms. Kabir, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Do you want me to close now?
Yes.
Okay, a very, very enlightening afternoon with such great presentations and deliberations. And I think we've heard lots of new terms that we are going to be exploring further. And as Fahim mentioned, this would be interesting to explore in follow-on sessions, and I'd request Mr. Imran of BIDD to continue this path. So, as we mentioned in the beginning, the digital labor platform business model is transforming the world of work, and the algorithmic management practices is going to be leading the way. Yes, technology is an enabler, but it doesn't solve all the problems. We heard that Raisa, the quote she meant was very interesting, that you innovate and you regulate later. But in the case of Bangladesh, we are really lacking in regulations. We would like to enforce what Fahim also mentioned and Mr. Rehan mentioned, that look at the policymakers and the platform providers are not interested in regulating. We understand why. So there has to be some deep intervention there. And at the end of the day, the workers' welfare, we really need to make sure they're not exploited, and there's more transparency in the wages and also in their well-being. So with that, I'd like to close the session. Thank you all the speakers and the panelists and the audience. You've been wonderful. I'm sorry I could not be there in person, but I look forward to engaging further in future. Enjoy lunch. Thank you very much.